All right, welcome to the Karuna Life Podcast. I'm Gina Kitzmiller. I'm an intuitive, I'm an author, a Reiki master teacher, and I am founder of Trimatri Reiki. And today I have a special guest. Today we have Jennie Delich with us. And Jennie is a Qigong instructor. She is founder of QiCurious Qigong, rooted in the belief that Qigong is for everyone. She invites others into embodied practice, listening inwardly, moving with pleasure, and caring for themselves, with effects that ripple out to all humans, critters, and the natural world. She is a Holden Qigong certified teacher with additional certifications from Mimi Co-Deemer and previously served as teacher liaison for Holden Qigong. Through QiCurious Services, she facilitates a monthly embodied arts teacher circle and offers curriculum and learning design coaching to help teachers turn their expertise into clear, teachable offerings. So I met Jennie through Holden Qigong. She was the liaison that worked with me towards my certification, and I can tell you her energy just was so lovely that it even showed through email correspondence. And so we have stayed connected, and I am really grateful to have her here today to talk about one of my favorite topics, which is Qigong. So, Jennie, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Gina. Pleasure is entirely mine. It's a joy. Thank you.
So, for most people, I think, that are going to be listening or watching this, their first question is going to be, what is Qigong? I might have heard of it, but can you explain what it is?
Yeah, beautiful. Well, we've got the tricky bit out of the gate, which is how do you pronounce that word?
This is true.
The spelling QI catches a lot of us, especially if we're in the English speaking world. But yes, Qigong. And yeah, what is it? So, of course, the question comes up time and again. And, if I'm doing my elevator pitch, I've got just a moment with someone. Usually the easy go-to explanation is, hey, you've probably heard of Tai Chi. Well, Qigong and Tai Chi are related, and in fact, depending on who you ask, Tai Chi might be considered a form of Qigong. And another simple way to relate to it is mindfulness in motion, meditative movement. I often do add a little comparison for those who are familiar with Tai Chi, and that sometimes Tai Chi, if you're learning one of the long forms, can be a little scary for folks because it's almost like memorizing a choreography. So I do add a little bit of comfort that, at least with the style of Qigong that you and I know, the Holden style and many other styles, it's much more approachable in that you could have been studying it for 10 years or it might be your first day, but you can step into a class and drop right into practice and just follow the instruction. And day in and day out, it will grow in you in very unique ways, as I know you've experienced.
Yes, this is true. And I love how accessible it is because like I'm not a dancer. I don't have that like type of background, but it does really help me come into the present moment. And I know the benefits of it. I think I found Qigong back in 2020. And I laugh because how I first found it was this little woman that was on YouTube. I don't think she spoke English. And so I would be out in my backyard. I'm sure my kids thought I was nuts, and I would be trying to follow along. And I just loved it. There was something about it. And so then eventually I was like, I really wanted to learn like actually how to do it. And then I eventually found Lee Holden's program, and I thought, he did a wonderful job in teaching. But for you, how did you come to find Qigong?
Yeah, beautiful. Well, somewhat similar. I really relate to what you just said about, being in the backyard, making a supposed fool of yourself, which is part of the process, I think. And also going through that feeling of, oh my goodness, is anybody watching? And with continued practice, you eventually get to the point where you're like, well, I hope they are, and maybe they'll follow along too, because this is what I need in this moment. And so there's a beautiful journey there. But for myself, I trace it back. Goodness, I have to keep checking every time. It's about 7 years ago now. I think it was 2018 when I was sitting around the table. It was actually in my parents' house on vacation. One of my brothers sitting there, and one of my dear friends who I'd known for a really long time. And we were just swapping stories about energetic practices and energetic arts. And at that time, belly dance had been my true love for many years. I had nurtured belly dance and then a complementary yoga practice. And it was getting to the point for me where I loved the embodied practice of the dance, but also in belly dance circles, there's all this very well-meaning, kindly pressure to perform, perform. When are you performing again? And that wasn't speaking to me as much anymore. And part of it is, oh my goodness, making a costume takes so much,
They're
but
quite intricate, aren't they? I have a friend
it's
that was a belly dancer, and she would tell me about it. It was kind of sounded like a lot of pressure for the group to go and like perform, and so it was a little bit more involved.
right, right. Fun, but yeah, I just was feeling how do I make this my own? How do I dig into the embodiment? So sitting around the table that night, my brother pulls out a video. Hey, have you heard of this Qigong thing? And it happened to be one of Mimi Diemer's early videos that's pretty much gone viral and was part of what lifted her up a little bit. And bravo, because many of us have benefited from that. But she had two videos she shot just really casually in China and kind of in a public area. So you've got looky-loos ducking in, and it's just this really authentic practice of 8 brocades, and she's got a 5 elements practice. And I found those, and it was just like, yep, that's it. That is exactly what I'm talking about. And I was completely hooked on Qigong at that point and just couldn't get enough. So that's how it started for me.
I'm wondering if because you already had that background with belly dance, did you find like kind of the fluidity of the movements and being in like presence in your body? Was that a little bit easier for you, like coming from that background with belly dance and yoga?
Yes and no. As dancers, we're taught to be very precise. And so there's a lot of getting caught up in the precision of the movement, or at least that's what I experienced early on. Are those palms pointed up? Or are they pointed in? Where are the fingers? And being very particular about specifics, which ultimately, as I've continued my journey, I find that you know, it's a stage you go through in learning qigong forms. You've got to, process them mentally, but then if you can let go of that, drop into the energy, that's where the real magic happens. And so it did actually take me quite a few months of, well, this is fun. this feels like great movement, but what is this chi thing? And then after many months, it was like, oh, there's something much deeper to this practice. And then I was even that much more hooked.
Yeah, I had the similar experience. It took me a while. And I would think like, oh, like I do energy work, like I should have just felt it, but I didn't. I felt like it was useful, but it really was like a few months of consistent practice that it just kind of clicked one day. And then I was like, oh, like I actually feel this. And it was like that puzzle piece clicked. And I was like you were, I was like, okay, now I really want to continue and go deeper and explore this a little bit because on one hand it's very simple and yet there's a complexity to it, and it really is, I think, working with the physical body but also the energetic and opening energy through the meridian. So I fell in love with it. It sounds like you did too.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I've got a question for you. I remember like the lower dantian lighting up for me. And so that's the inner space in the lower abdomen, considered one of our grounding energy centers. And yeah, it wasn't so much like a single day, but I just, it's one of those things where it's kind of fuzzy at first, kind of fuzzy at first, and then you look back over the week or two and you're like, oh, wow. So the lower dantian was what really lit up for me, but did you have a similar experience or was yours different?
If I recall correctly, it was that there was a certain movement, and like I actually felt like the energy shift and like move and like almost a physical sensation. And then it was like, oh, okay. Because you can feel and I'm sure like for a lot of people, when we like open up the energy lines and you open up down the backs of your legs, you kind of stand up and it just feels good, right? You're like, oh, that feels better. I feel like I can kind of breathe. I don't feel so constricted. But this was something like distinctly energetic, like where you felt the tingles. And then I was like, oh, and I know you're not supposed to chase that feeling. You're supposed to kind of just allow it. But it was kind of hard not to be like, where's that going? And what's happening? So it was just a really very unique experience. And it was just really, for me, it kind of just clicked something into place of like, okay, now I'm really understanding a little bit deeper part of this.
Yeah, I love it. And I think that is one of the encouragements for folks who are just kind of dabbling in it. And I encourage my students to take some home for homework, so to speak, because it won't necessarily click immediately for everyone. I'm hearkening back to a recent class I did actually with Mimi Kodumer. She was teaching the teachers, and she had us doing a practice of, okay, just move the hand. Great. What's that feel like? Okay. Yeah. Okay. Move the arm. Okay. Great. What's that feel like? Okay. Root down, move from center. What's that feel like? It's the same motion, but so much more engaged on the energetic, so much more felt, embodied, somatic, like the layers just come together. And and that takes a little bit of cultivation in a practice. It's not something that immediately clicks, but when it does, it just becomes so rich.
Wow. Yeah, that is really powerful. So I'm wondering when you started to teach, like, how was that for you? For me, I found Qigong was harder to teach in some ways
Mm.
because it's so subtle. And I feel like with yoga, it's very much structure. So I can cue structure, but there's nuances and subtle things that you say in Qigong classes that it's like you're not only trying to teach the movement, but then you're also cueing all these other things and the layers to it that I found it for me was almost a little bit more complicated.
I can see that. Yep, yep. I don't have yoga teacher training per se. Back in the day, I did a few beginner belly dance classes. Actually, I did them for my second language students at the time, so it was pretty low pressure. But I had some experience of, like you say, cueing the physicality of things. Um, with Qigong, it was interesting because I lived just outside of Portland, Oregon, had moved here a little over a decade ago, and it's one of the nexus areas for the type of belly dance I really love. So fusion style belly dance here, it's beautiful. And I would often think, do I want to teach that? Is that something I'd want to cultivate in that practice? And it like the message was always, no, not really. This isn't the teaching path for you. And then when I met Qigong, I had about a little over a year of personal practice, and I was pretty into it, doing it pretty regularly. And then the message on that was, this I can teach. This is the thing to teach. I can do that. So it was almost more of it was drawing me into the teaching, and I didn't really know what that meant at the time. I just felt the compulsion to teach it. So having an education background, I did teaching English to speakers of other languages. That's my master's degree, and I worked in online facets of that for many years. Um, so having that background, like the thing that came prominently to mind was, I need a practicum. So I actually lassoed my brother and my dear friend who were sitting around the table with me back in the day, that fateful evening, and said, okay, you're going to be my students. And thankfully they wanted to play along. And so they've been my students since that moment. And I just started teaching them and knowing it's low pressure. They're the ones who helped to introduce me to the practice, and they'd let me experiment with them. In fact, we called it QiCurious Experiment. That was
So
the
is that how
original
you
title.
partially came up with the name for your like the company and that your website, QiCurious website?
How did I come up with that? I knew I wanted to start a company to support that at that point. I don't know, that name just came to mind, and I was like, that's it. It's got to be QiCurious.
I love that.
Um, Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. And so with the teaching journey, it was, yeah, it kind of pulled out of me. And then I started to ask, what does that really look like? What does that mean? How do I go out into the world to a studio and say, hey, you should hire me to be a teacher? So that's when I started looking for credential programs. And that's actually how I found my way to Holden Qigong is I knew I wanted teaching credentials, and Holden Qigong had a really lovely 200-hour program, and it's still, I believe, a very lovely program. It's super foundational, and it got me just what I needed to be able to approach studios and shake people's hand and say, yes, I'm a certified Qigong teacher. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. And so when you do have students that start, I guess I'm wondering too, like, are there certain benefits that people begin to notice, like, as they're in the classes? Like, is it immediate for some people? Does it take longer for others? Like, what does that look like for someone who's a new student of Qigong?
Right. One of the things I'd probably be careful with is assuming it's going to look the same for anyone. But there are, tendencies. And the first that you labeled early on, like it can just feel good to move your body in this way. Like on the physical level of things, Qigong is a practice that gets us moving the body in about as many ways as you can. And that's healthy for the body. And you do it in a very low impact, gentle way. And the instruction is to listen in and to honor your own body, to modify for your needs. So that can be just soothing for stress release. That tends to happen early on. Can also be quite empowering for individuals who might have attended other classes that feel a little more like monkey see, monkey do, like you need to do what the teacher's doing. Not that that's the typical teaching necessarily. I think we're getting quite a lot better at that with somatic practices. So there'll be some immediate body effects and probably a few, depending on who you are coming into the practice, a few people will walk away just feeling a little lightness of the heart, a little bit of soothing on the emotions, a little spiritual uplifting, depending on their backgrounds. Folks who are already meditating regularly will often tap into that realm of the practice pretty easily. I would also like to note, though, a pretty common experience early on is to go through detox, and that's not necessarily always the most comfortable reaction for folks. So sometimes, someone might go to a Qigong class for a few weeks in a row, take a little bit of it home for homework, and it's different for everyone, but let's say maybe 3 to 6 weeks in, start having like maybe a little headache or maybe just a little not quite feeling right in the body, feel nervous in the nervous system, might be a little achy somewhere. It can show up in different ways. And it can be related to, if anyone's familiar with acupuncture, healing crisis and acupuncture, where the body is actually, it's actually a healthy process for the body because it's beginning to release things that have been stuck. And we can talk about those 3 levels: body, heart, spirit. It can be stuck on any of those levels, but through the practice, you start to release these things. And as the body detoxes, it's what the body does when someone has a hangover. It detoxes and it's not super comfy. And so that's not an uncommon practice early on, is to go through a little bit of that. And I like to tell people that going into Qigong because it's not going to stick around too long for most of us. It's going to be something that goes through its course. And on the other side, that's usually when you start to deepen into the practice with a little more connection. And you can continue forward on that journey and start to feel a little more immediate stress release, a little bit more immediate soothing of the system.
No,
Some
that's a
good
good thing
things
to
and
bring up. It's true. And even with energy work, sometimes I think it's like any sort of detox. When we're putting really good things or a higher vibration into the body, sometimes some of the gunk has to kind of come up and work its way out energetically. And I've told people sometimes you might have an energy session and you feel great, but the next day, I always call it's like a Reiki hangover sometimes where you're like, oh, I'm kind of tired. Like, I need to drink more water. I might need a nap. And it's because you're kind of rebalancing and recalibrating. And I think that Qigong, because it's working on all these different levels, is going to allow you to recalibrate. But for that little period, you might have some discomfort. So I'm glad that you brought that up.
yeah, yeah, and it's something that is usually most predominant early on, and with other energy work too.
So, are there any like common misperceptions that you find with people when they first start Qigong? Like they're saying, like, oh, I don't think I'm coordinated enough or I'm not flexible. Are there some things that come up for people frequently?
Sure. I mean, we can we can take those as examples. Like some folks will come in, like, as you said, like, I'm not a dancer. This looks kind of flowy, dancy. Um, and that's fine. Really, one of the things I try to bring home to my students, and I start most practices by saying, this is your practice. And I mean it. So, what I mean by that is, I'm going to guide you through some practices, some forms. And what I ask of you is to listen in and really be cognizant of your needs. So, if you're not flexible, if you're actually not coordinated, and most people who say those things don't mean them in the extreme that they might think they do, that's okay. Honor it, go with it. I think, you know, and for as accessible as Qigong is, one of the big catches that people get caught up in early on is, you know, needing to be something in particular for the practice. And I think the big discovery comes in a moment when you realize the practice is that you don't need to be anything other than who you are, other than what you bring into the practice. I think that ultimately is Qigong to me. It is practicing yourself and practicing in conversation with the layers of yourself. So a lot of the nervousness is often around the physical body. And yes, we operate by moving the body, but that's just a part of the practice. Yes, if you prefer just to come to Qigong and enjoy the physical practice, you can. Doesn't mean you'll be able to avoid the other layers, but they might not be super forward and conscious for you, and that's okay. But we're also, it's a somatic practice that helps the emotions process and it helps layers of ourselves kind of just rise to the surface, express themselves, and allow us to move through that expression, take what serves and let go of what doesn't. It's also a practice on the conscious and spiritual level of just opening up to potential, to possibility, and ultimately by being in the present moment, which is an eternal practice. Is it not?
Yes, I think for most of us.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, whatever objections people might have coming in, I think there's a lot of reassurance in knowing that you can explore the practice on any of these levels. You can explore it from where you are in the moment. And there's some really functional concerns sometimes. I've got students who, I can't stand for more than 10 minutes at a time. Well, this is a great practice for you because you can do seated Qigong. Almost everything in Qigong can translate to a seated position really beautifully. Um, so you can do that. And for example, I have a student who had some recent shoulder issues and just very limited mobility in that region. And that's also fine. I enjoy that she keeps coming back because I think it's helping her, you know, she can start by doing the practice on the side that is available for it, and then just incorporating just what feels right in the injured area. With Qigong, we approach it with 2/3 effort. So the invitation is not to push into pain, not to push past your ability. Anyway, Gina, that's a really long
No, that was really good. And I think
explanation
it's
there
a
because
really,
there's so much.
it's such a valid point, and it's one of the things that I love about it because, like you said, there isn't like a destination to get anywhere. And if you're ever in a Qigong class, one of the cool things about it is that everybody looks different because everyone's body's different and how we move is different. But you just see, like, when people really get in the moment, they just get this kind of look of relaxation or of joy. I would say, even of just being in the body and feeling the body move, it does really, I think, lighten the heart, and I think it helps calm the nervous system. So I think that if anyone is like curious about it, it's like when you go, just know that everyone is going to look different, and you're not really paying attention to anyone next to you, because the attention is what am I feeling, what is my body doing. And oftentimes when you might get the mechanics of a movement, well, then you're not done, because then it's like, okay, how can I drop in deeper, how can I add more flow to this? So you're constantly kind of just observing and refining and relaxing even more, and oftentimes that's difficult, right? That's the when you're like, you don't realize that we're tensing muscles. And so it's the constant awareness that I think is really valuable. But it's also one of the really fun parts, I think, in the practice.
Mhm. Absolutely. Completely agree with you. We're just bringing to mind, there's this comparison, like in our modern yoga class culture, there tends to be, and I'm going to vastly generalize here, this is not every yoga class, but there tends to be that, ooh, who looks best in the yoga pants comparison, and ooh, who can push it the farthest, and that just doesn't really function very well in Qigong. Like that, if you take that attitude into Qigong, you probably won't appreciate the practice, and you'll probably be ignored by everyone else in the room anyway. So, because everyone's coming into themselves, and that's, yeah, it's a practice that it's not created for comparison. It's just created for you to explore, who am I here now in this moment? Interesting. How does that differ from who I was 5 minutes ago, yesterday? How might it differ from who I'll be in the future? And what does all of that inform of me here, now, in the present moment? And so you're constantly bringing it back to present moment awareness. Qigong can give you an alternative where you can achieve a very similar state of presence and being, but something about the movement and the flow through the body and working with the energy body in motion can often help to ground you into that meditative state and into that moment. So it's a really great practice for folks who do struggle with seated, just straight up classic
Which
meditation.
is really hard for a lot of us. And I think too that, and oftentimes my guides have even said before meditation, if it's like, if you're really busy and you just come and plop yourself down and you try to meditate, like sometimes you're trying to close all the windows that you've had open in your mind. And I think that movement really, especially that calming movement, coming gently into the present moment, we're not forcing, that those are often the times that I will do meditation after a Qigong practice, or there's been times where my guides have stopped me and said, stand up and do a few movements, because I also think energetically they're trying to get everything open and flowing and like your channel open. So they'll say, do some movement, drink a cup of tea or water, and then come back and meditate. It actually makes a really big difference. So, but I do think it pairs beautifully with meditation. And some people might like to try to sit, for even just 5 minutes after a Qigong practice. It can really help with what a lot of us are dealing with the stress and the nervous system feeling very activated and fight or flight. It's really creating those little windows of calm. Like, I'm okay. It's safe to be here. It's safe to be in my body, and I can tune inward rather than all of the distractions that we have coming at us in the outside world.
Yeah, wise guides. Thank you.
So
Yes,
I'm wondering, that was great, Jenny. Do you have a particular like student story that you might be able to share without disclosing any personal information?
sure. Actually, I was thinking about this before talking with you because, like, well, which one? But I guess I'll share one that it was precious. And this was a student, but also someone I was coordinating with to offer Qigong at her facility. And she's just very gracious in bringing different practices into her facility. And she knew she liked Qigong, she liked the idea of it, she wanted to try it out, and she wanted to share it with others. So it was a nice collaboration. And she would go through the practice with me and enjoy it each time. And it was about the third or fourth time I think we were flowing together. And afterwards, she came up. She's like, Jennie, I felt chi. She was like, I just thought this was like a thing you talk about and, it sounds good and it's part of the metaphor. But she's like, because we were doing a little bit of pulsing on a chi ball in that class. And she's like, no, I felt it. Like it was there between my palms. I'm like, cool.
Oh, that's
Yay.
great.
Just it really manifests for her all of a sudden after enjoying the flow and enjoying the movements, and she would have been happy to just continue doing that as the practice, but it just the look on her face and the sparkle in her energy was awesome at that point. And yeah, so that's
Oh,
my
that's a good story. I like that
yeah
one.
moment of discovery story. um yeah, so many students who are precious to me in different ways.
Oh, it's such a wonderful practice. I was just wondering, do you have like a favorite like posture or like movement that is just kind of like your go-to, if you don't mind like sharing? You don't have to
Ooh.
necessarily do it on camera, but I'm just wondering.
Well,
No pressure.
again, this is another like, which one? To be perfectly honest, and I'm happy to do it on camera and offer it to anyone who's present, who's not driving. Uh, but honestly, one of my favorite practices is shaking. And it's just bouncing into the feet, letting that shake up through the legs. Knees are soft. Let the pelvis soften and be loose. Release the shoulders. Arms are like spaghetti at the sides. And then, without adding any motion, just release through the neck and breathe with it. And if you want, you can add something like a hum, mm, or a big exhale. Ah, and bring that to stillness. And you can do that for as long as you want, actually. But if you need like a 30, 60, 90-second reset at any point in your day, shaking is gorgeous. And then just give yourself a few breaths when you come to that stillness. And I'll give you a teaching I picked up from Mimi Quotimer, but it's one that like it'll stay with me. It never gets old. So in that stillness, find the motion in the stillness and be with that. And then as you softly bring motion back into your body, notice the stillness in the motion. And that never gets
That's
old.
good. Oh my gosh, that was very deep. I was doing it just even seated because it feels good to just kind of shake out my shoulders. And that actually, it's funny because if you would ask me what my favorite is, I would have said the same thing. I love shaking. My kids laugh, a little bit. And when you do it, it looks silly, but it feels amazing. So,
I mean, just point to the family dog and ask them about
yeah,
it. They know. They
it's
know.
it's like it's fine. Yeah, I do have to laugh on a random side note that when I do any sort of like Holden Qigong, my corgi, I almost want to video this because once he starts talking, my corgi will beeline into the room. And it only is when I'm doing one of his classes. I don't understand what it is, but it's like he hears Lee's voice and he's like in the room. And I'm like, I have to record this at some point because it's hysterical to watch this little one come barreling around the corner every time, like as if on cue. And I haven't been able to figure it out. But the shaking is really, really beneficial. I love to do it at the end of the day too, just to kind of shake off other people's energy, especially if you've been stuck in traffic or just, around people who are short tempered. It's just a great way to kind of shake off what's not yours and then kind of calm and recenter. And my goodness, what you said was just so deep and profound. I might have to like go back and write that down to tuck it away in my teaching notes because it was beautifully stated.
Please. Well, and Mimi, she's the one I got that from. But like I said, never gets old. And if we're doing asides, I'll also share with you. My rooster, Mr. Henderson, is completely obsessed with Lee Holden. Um,
Really?
so I will often do class on my iPad and I'll take it out into the yard, and Mr. Henderson will come up and he sits there and pecks at my iPad and what's Lee doing today? And he just,
That is
yeah,
really
I've had to
funny.
take pictures and send them to Lee and just be like,
Okay,
my
so
rooster is obsessed with you.
there might be a little bit of like an energy resonance
Yeah.
that because that's okay. That is really
Yeah. Well,
interesting. Thank you for sharing that. Hmm.
there's a huge connection with animals. Like, yeah, I encourage everyone to get into Qigong. Get into Qigong, form your personal
Yes,
practice, and then go take it out into nature and just see what nature responds with. Because sometimes you'll be
that's a good.
dramatically surprised at how, especially creatures, will respond to it.
Yes.
Uh,
What was I going to say? Do you have a favorite place that you like to do your qigong? Do you do it indoors, outdoors? Like, what does that look like for your own personal practice?
Right. I go outdoors whenever I can. And, I'm in the Pacific Northwest, so very privileged to have rather temperate weather. We've just gotten through winter, which sometimes I get itchy and just throw on layers and go out anyway. 'Cause there's nothing like being on the earth doing Qigong and smelling nature, hearing the birds, being with the trees. Qigong is a celebration of the natural world. The metaphors we bring into our practice are nature-based metaphors. And so to me, it just, like, nature is doing Qigong. Nature represents Qigong. And so it feels right to be outside. So I have a few special places around the property that I'll go to and just do my practice. And yeah, any of those earlier, the
Yes, no,
teacher
that's really
practice.
good. Yeah, I'm in Ohio, so like for the winter, I've been by my fireplace has been, which I just
Cozy.
have gotten used to. I have teenagers coming in and out, and I was like, yeah, you know, when you're comfortable, when your kids' friends come, and I'm still like, I'm not stopping. I mean, I'm just going to continue my practice,
I love it.
and they just know it's just what I do, and I don't think anyone really even bats an eye now. So I think sometimes we get more self conscious than what other people, especially when we're outdoors. I think most people kind of just observe, and I'm sure you've had this too. And I remember having neighbors say like, "Oh, are you doing Tai Chi?" Like, and I'd say, "Well, no, I'm doing Qigong," but then they just go, "Oh, that's cool," and they kind of continue on their way. So it is. It's really beautiful to practice outside though when you can.
Yeah. Oh, completely.
So one final takeaway here, what I would like to ask you. So, is there, for someone who's kind of just curious about it, but that's like not really sure like how to start or how much they should do? Like, I remember when I first started, I actually had a hard time doing longer practices for some reason. I don't know if my
Mm.
mind just couldn't quiet, but it was like I had to start smaller and then eventually I kind of worked my way up. But would you have like a recommendation for someone who is like that? That's like, gosh, I can't seem to sit still or even get into the practice for those longer classes. Like, what would you suggest?
Actually, I think that that's a really valuable acknowledgement because it's true and it can be surprising as a new student. Like maybe you lift weights, maybe you run miles, but you come to Qigong and you're like, why can't I stand still for more than 15 minutes? You're not alone. And I think a lot of it has to do with, we're really kicking that energy body into practice in a way that some other types of athletics or engagement might not. Um, Also, our foundational Wuji posture, we do stand in a particular posture for quite a while sometimes in practice, and it's something to work into. So for someone who's just getting started, there is probably a great value in starting small. 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes. Great, no problem. And if you're privileged to have someone teaching in your area, and I hope more and more of us are privileged in this way, I know depending on where you are, sometimes you have to hunt a little bit. But maybe take that hour-long class once a week, but then bring it home and do the little bite-sized practices throughout the week. I do recommend, doesn't need to be every day, but I recommend a consistent practice. Maybe it's every other day. Maybe you just make sure you do 2 to 3 times a week, even if it's bite size, because that's going to help build the system, basically, help build your relationship with the energy body, with your meridian system, so that you can drop in more readily and you'll be able to go 20, 30, 40 minutes over time in your own personal practice. Uh, if you're not privileged to have someone in the area, of course, hopping online, always an option. I've got a few online offerings myself, but I'm not alone. There are quite a few brilliant people out there with some freebies on YouTube. And you'll just, dabble. Find the teachers who speak to you, because the other thing I'd say is you might find a Qigong teacher. Maybe they resonate with you, maybe they don't. Well, don't be dismayed, because that's just one style. There are so many flavors of Qigong, and I would encourage folks to dabble a little bit and just see what really speaks to them, because, yeah, it's a big, broad world, and kind of on purpose. There's a lot of diversity in
That
Qigong.
is true. There is a lot of diversity into it. So I would agree with that too. And I also think that even doing, 10 minutes a day is actually, you will feel the results. Like I think in your
Yeah.
stress level and
Yeah.
just your energy level throughout the day. So if you're like, gosh, I'm so busy, but I can fit in that like 10-minute window, great. You will still notice the results, even if you're only doing that consistently throughout the week.
Right. Right. And if you don't know anything but this conversation you just listened to, go ahead and shake for 3 minutes when you need a break in the afternoon, and just try that out for a few weeks and see how you feel.
So, can you tell people? I know you have some new offerings that are going to be available this year. And we were talking before we started to record that I was telling Jennie that I feel that people are really looking for a community. And I think, in particular, online things are going to be very prevalent this year. But on that note, because you didn't know that when I told you, Jennie's right in line with what I'm seeing, like astrologically, and what I'm getting from my guides. So, what can you tell people a little bit about where they can find you and some offerings that you may have coming up?
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, I've been in a privileged position. We've got the rise of the fire horse. We're coming into the year of the fire horse, and wow, it's been some energy. And I know you've probably explored this with others, and yeah, there's been a lot going on energetically, and it's given me the opportunity. It felt like things are just being pulled out of me. So, I'm continuing my QiCurious Qigong offerings, which is my Qigong teaching. I've got a little bit online and I've got a little bit in person, and you're always welcome to drop by QiCuriousQigong.com and see what I've got on the plate to offer you at the time. But I have also recently started QiCurious Services, which is me looking around and seeing, there are a lot of communities and groups to support particular practices, but what I see is an opportunity to bring us together in a broader community and kick off some conversations in, I'm calling it embodied arts, because I'd really like to draw anyone who resonates with that term. So, maybe it's the more obvious things like Qigong, yoga, maybe dance, but also Reiki. I'm thinking of my sound healers, breath work. There's so many modalities that we could consider embodied arts. And actually, I've had some really interesting conversations with musicians about how music teaching is art. And Braille came up the other day. And I was like, yes, please. If you feel called as someone who relates to the term embodied arts, please come. So that's the long way of saying an offering that I'm kicking off is an embodied arts teacher circle. And that's going to be a monthly coming together, first Thursday of the month. The first one kicked off in March 5th, but we'll take it forward. First Thursday of the month. I'm going to roll with 8 a.m. Pacific, and we'll see how that goes for a few months and take it forward from there. Yeah,
And I know you did a Fire Horse Qigong workshop, which I attended, which was delightful. And you wove the theme of the Fire Horse beautifully through the class that I just was really impressed with. I could tell that you would put a lot of work into it. Like you can tell when someone's like put thought and time into it in terms of the information that you presented, which I was learning things about the fire horse that I hadn't read or studied even beforehand. So Jennie had some really great information about it. And then just also the class itself. It was so much fun. But it was also really just moving some energy in a different way. So you taught it beautifully. So I definitely enjoyed it, and we'll be looking forward to future offerings that you do.
Thank you, thank you. And I'd say I put the recording of that one up on YouTube. It was a contribution-based class. So if anyone wants to go play fire horse, you're welcome to look that up on YouTube and join in.
That is good. I'll put the link
Yeah.
in the show notes as well as a link to your website so they can see like where you are and then what your online offerings are going to be. But it sounds like you've got a lot kind of coming in through the year of 2026, like a lot of different things. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, it's exciting. I'm letting the intuition be the guide this year because it really is. It's following this, oh, let's do this now. Okay, let's do this now. Sounds about right. And yeah, it's fun. I'm having a really fun time with fireworks so far.
Me too. Yes, it is. It's been an interesting start to the year, but I love the you can feel the momentum and just the opportunity out there. So I'm excited to see what this year will bring for sure. Wonderful.
Wonderful.
All right. So thank you so much, Jennie. I really am grateful to have you on here. And as always, if you like this podcast, please follow and please leave us a review or a comment. Let us know what your favorite Qigong posture or movement is. I would be curious to hear it. And if you have any questions, feel free to email me, Gina at thekarunalife.com. I always like to get comments and suggestions. But Jennie, thank you so much for being here. And I look forward to maybe having you on in the future. I know there's a lot more things we could talk about in terms of the 5-element theory, and like Qigong is kind of the tip of the iceberg in terms of good conversations that we could have.
Absolutely. Oh my goodness, Gina, such a pleasure. I really thank you deeply for bringing me on, and thank you all for listening in. It's a joy. Thank you.
Wonderful. All right, everyone. Well, enjoy the rest of your day.